And joining us now is Will Pate. He is the host of CommandN.tv. That's an online technology news program. And we're glad that you joined us at TVO tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk first a little background, because this is a whole area that a lot of our viewers, I suspect, are not as familiar with. If I got a website and I want to get listed on Google, what do I do?
Well, a lot of websites, depending on what kind of website it is, the first thing is really to get someone else to link for to you. So the way that Google calculates PageRank, which is how they determine how popular a site is very similar to how citations determine how popular an idea is in the scientific community.
Okay, so I've got a website, let's say I'm a plumber, and I want to make sure that whenever anybody puts plumbing Toronto in that search field, that I come up at the top of the thing. How does that happen?
That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
And there's really, now you're getting into search engine optimization, which is really the question of how do I get to be the top of Google for the terms that I want. And there's really two main ways to go about that. The first way is when you build your page, you want it to have what are called keywords, which is things like plumbing in Toronto, maybe plumbing in different neighborhoods, that sort of thing. And then the second piece is to get people to link to you, and specifically the people who have better page rank. So much like in the intellectual field, if Thomas Friedman says you're really smart, then more people are likely to think that you're really smart than if I say you're really smart. So you've got people linking to you, and ideally they would be using those keywords. So I would link to you and say that Steve is great for plumbing in Toronto.
And when you Google something, the websites come up in a certain order, right? Is there a, I mean, I guess the computerized term for this is PageRank algorithm?
Yes.
Do you know how to do that?
I don't know how to code the algorithm, but I do know, we have a general idea of how it's done. It's proprietary, so we don't know exactly. But actually, before the founders of Google started the company, they actually wrote a PhD thesis about this. And the idea was essentially that the more pages that link to a page, the more important it probably is. And that you can also, in that algorithm, calculate how important those pages that are linking to your page are. Use that to calculate how important your page is.
But I get that algorithm must be top secret, right?
Oh, yes, it is.
That's a serious piece of dope, I guess is the expression you guys use or something, right?
Or intellectual property.
Intellectual property, that was the expression I was looking for. Okay, this search engine optimization, so we get that. You want to be high up the list. However, there's a good news side of the story, there's a bad news side of the story, right? What do you call it? Black hats and white hats or this kind of thing?
Yeah, there's a, white hat is the kind of just stuff that I described, and that's basically following what the search engines want you to do. And then there's a whole suite of black hat techniques that people have tried, and they work better at different times because, you know, you get ahead of Google, then they catch up with you and that sort of thing. It's a cat and mouse game for sure. And some of those things look like building tons of other pages that just link to your page. So building out 1 million pages that just link to your page and I'll reference you with the term plumbing Toronto, for instance. Doing things like putting links on pages but hiding them so that when you go to the page, you don't see that, you know, it looks like an article about something completely different, but hidden in the page that people can't see are a bunch of links to your site about plumbing in Toronto, which is something that Google does not want you to do. So it's kind of like an arms race.
Is there anything you can do about black hats or black hatting? Do you call it black hatting?
That's a good question. I haven't heard that term, but
okay.
we'll give it to you.
I just made it up. Right.
That's half the fun of the internet, is you get to make up new terms every day.
Can you do anything about it, though?
There are always going to be people who do it. If you see your competitors doing it, there are people at Google who are quite available so that you can report competitors doing black hat techniques.
So because there are so many people who want to get their websites at the top of the Google list, this is a new business, I gather, right? There are people in the business to do search engine optimization.
It's not a new business. It's been around for about a decade.
It has. How many, any guess about how many people are in this game?
Quite a few. Quite a few. And it's a lucrative business because it's a real key business objective for a lot of companies.
So how much, again, if I'm that Toronto plumbing company and I want to get high up the list, how much do I have to pay a search engine optimization company to try to make that happen?
Well, I think really, I mean, I can't give you a quote because I'm not offering it as a service, so I couldn't tell you that. But I think you could do it a couple ways. It could be, can you take a look at my site and kind of re-architect the site so it's naturally better suited to that? You would ask them, could you find some sites that might be able to link to me? You could ask them, could you help me do AdWords, which are those little ads you see on the side of the search box when you do a Google search. You see those ads in the sidebar. Well, people are paying for that. And they're paying different amounts to be higher up or lower down in that kind of box of ads. So those are all different ways to get more traffic to a site.
Are we talking hundreds or thousands of dollars to do this kinds of thing?
Yeah, it usually ends up in the thousands of dollars.
In the thousands.
Some big companies pay a lot of money for it.
Do businesses have any idea whether or not they are actually being, you know, whether they're getting the business because they're high up the list.
Yeah,
How do they know?
a lot of businesses do a lot of tracking and analytics and metrics on their web searching and where the traffic's coming from. The difference between web marketing and traditional marketing is that traditional marketing can be a little fuzzy. You calculate on Nielsen ratings or how many issues of a magazine or a newspaper go out, but it's hard to tell how many people saw your ad and then took it in to buy it, which is why you see a lot of bring in this coupon and we'll give you 10% off. It's a way to track that conversion. Online, you can track where people come from, how many of them, how long they stayed on the page, what pages they went to, how often they converted, whether people coming from Google convert better to sales than people coming from Yahoo or from a partner site or a site where you bought an ad. So you can really drill down and get a very fine understanding of what's happening.
Now, here's the next thing. If you're, again, I'm going to go back to this old example. If you are that Toronto plumbing company and you've done your search engine optimization, paid whatever it is, you plug those words in and you come up at the top of the list, that's a wonderful thing. What if you're number 21 on the list and therefore you're not on page 1?
It's tough.
So really all the business is going to people who are on page 1?
A lot of the business is, and it's even more so, a lot of it goes to the first 3 to 5 links. The truth is that when people surf online, they're not spending a lot of time doing really deep research. They usually do a search in Google, and they'll usually go to the first 3 links, sometimes to the first 5, and fewer will go down and down and down, which is why so much money gets spent in this space on trying to make sure that you're number 1 on Google.
So it's crucial to be on page 1. Crucial to be on page 1 of Google.
If possible.
If possible. What's Google bombing?
Google bombing is a sort of thing that's come up. It's a way to hack that sort of idea of keywords that link to something to make a statement. Some companies have used it competitively to link to their competitors or bad reviews, things like that. It's been used for political purposes, so people who disagreed with Tony Blair or George Bush would attribute words to that person. I think for Tony Blair it was liar. I think for George Bush it was miserable failure. They would keep linking to that person or their profile somewhere with those keywords, so at a certain point when you search for liar in Google, the website of Tony Blair came up first. So it's often used as a way to do a political statement. But it can also be used as a way, they have search engine contests sometimes, where search engine optimizers will compete. The person holding the contest will make up a ridiculous term that's never been used anywhere else before, like incandescent brilliance or something like that. Or just they'll make up a term, take 2 made-up words and put them together. And search engine optimizers will compete to see who can get that number 1 link on Google.
Now I know Google doesn't want to be political, but do they do anything about miserable failure and Bush comes up automatically? Do they?
Yeah, they do. Their stance on it is that they don't want to get too involved, but they also don't want Google to be used as a political kind of tool. They have publishing tools, things like Blogger and things like that, to allow people to have free speech. I don't think they want their search results to be an area of political debate.
Right. Let me read something out of the New York Times a couple of years ago. It says, because Web 2.0 celebrates, quote, the noble amateur over the expert, and because many search engines and websites tout popularity rather than reliability, it's easy for misinformation and rumors to proliferate in cyberspace. I, in preparing for our talk today, read a number of pieces where, let's say the New York Times, for example, because this was the stuff I read, incorrectly, the first time out of the gate, report on something. Maybe a week later, they correct it. But the fact is the original incorrect story is still there. Not only still there, but obviously higher up the list than what's not there. How do you save your reputation in this day and age if the incorrect story, which a future employer may find on Google, is there forever?
And that's something people really need to think about when they put things online, is that anything you put online, even if it's in a private space like, say, Facebook, you put a picture up, well, it's very easy for someone to take that picture, save it to their computer, and then put it somewhere else. Not hard at all, actually. So when you get into this issue of how do you deal with the legacy of the content that you create online, I think there's a couple things you need to do. I think you need to be very careful about what you say before you say it. And tools like Twitter, which is very popular now, can often be a little bit dangerous because it's easy to make a very quick statement that you're not thinking about and you're doing it in the moment and it's real time, but you're not really thinking about how am I going to feel about this being public about me 10 years from now. It's one of the reasons that Google also loves blogs, is that the content that blogs create is always fresh and relevant, and same with newspapers that allow their content to be public. I think newspapers could probably take a practice that bloggers often do, which is when they correct something, they keep the original story, but they do what's called a strike through, where they put a line through what was incorrect and then put a correction on that original story. So anyone who reads that 10 years from now will see, oh, they made a mistake, but they corrected it, and it's all here.
That's interesting, because libraries, I guess, and newspapers do in the old-fashioned way when they clip them out and put them in a file. If there were a mistake, you know, a librarian would be able to take that newspaper article out and throw it away because it was wrong.
Yep.
Can't do that anymore.
No.
And my suspicion is that newspapers, particularly in this day and age, don't have the budget or the inclination to do what you just suggested. So what recourse do you have if you've been Google bombed and there is misinformation about you out there forever?
Again, that's one of those things you can talk to Google about. There are people like Matt Cutts from Google, who is a blogger and very accessible to people. He's kind of a good public face for Google, at least online. Marissa Mayer does the job with the press, but he kind of does that job online. And you know, you can also, so you can talk to them, but you can also look at what is the strategy around dealing with this. You know, why are people doing this? Is there some legitimate concern here? And also, how do I open up a dialogue with those people so they don't feel like we're enemies and they need to Google bomb me to have a voice, right?
Can you sue a Google bomber?
Actually, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any suits that have been successfully done against anyone for that.
Could businesses appease a Google bomber?
I think that's probably a better strategy.
You online people, eh? Yeah, that's the way to go. Do you think Google bombing and SEO together make the quality of information better or worse on the internet?
Well, I think what's going on with the internet is that the quality of information is getting a little bit better, but what's really happening is there's a lot more information than there used to be. And this is often a debate that happens between bloggers and journalists, and the distinction between the two can often be blurry, but you'll often hear journalists say, well, you know, you guys on the blogs, you rush to put content online and it's wrong and then you fix it later. And then bloggers often make that same statement back to journalists saying that, hey, well, you're putting stuff on the air or putting stuff in the paper that you maybe don't even correct later because you don't think it's particularly important to correct, but it's not right. So there's a bit of a back and forth there. I think whenever you're reading online, you need to do critical reading, just like when you read in the newspaper. You know, if you've read The Black Swan, you would know that even a lot of what goes in traditional media, looking back, turns out to be very incorrect, or you get granularity at the sacrifice of the broad understanding of something.
Granularity?
You get, you know, with newspaper articles, with journalists, with the news every day, you get little slices of everything, but you kind of miss the big picture. And sometimes those little slices can be a little bit misleading because you see what's happening in a story right now, but you don't see why it happened or what's going on or what's the bigger picture.
You ever been Google bombed?
Not me. I hope it doesn't happen.
What would you do if it did?
I would probably talk to Matt Cutts at Google. I would probably reach out to the folks who were Google bombing me and figure out what kind of, you know, did they have a dispute with me? Was it legitimate? Was there a way to bridge that gap between us?
And in the meantime, tell me about CommandN.tv. One last thing. What do you do?
Well, CommandN is a weekly online video show. We cover technology. I co-host it with Emma MacArthur, who a lot of your viewers might know from Tech TV. She was also on City TV, and she's a really great kind of tech journalist. And we talk about news stories, what's going on online in the technology industry. We usually do a really interesting and in-depth guide to how to do something, like how to recharge all the batteries in your house or that kind of thing. And then at the end, we usually do a really quick, here's my favorite link this week. We each do that.
And if I Google searched technology, television, online, cute young hosts, how high up the list would you guys be?
I hope it would be number one.
Well, I should do that after we get off the air and find out if that works. Will, it's good of you to join us at TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.